Hello and welcome, I'm your Code Monkey, and here's an interesting video on a topic that is simultaneously very obvious but also not really talked about. It's something that I see in quite a bunch of comments every now and then, that is simply the idea that everyone has their own journey, and if you make any comparisons, they should really only be done against yourself. You should not compare yourself directly to others, especially if they're on different parts of their journey. Sometimes I get some comments from people watching my videos, and they're basically saying, oh, I'm too dumb, everything comes easy to him, but for me I don't understand anything. That is really just a false premise created by the fact that someone is on the beginner stage and they are comparing themselves to someone who is on a completely different stage of their career. Now in this case me, and they are ignoring the fact that I have over 25 years of experience making code. I've been programming since I was 10 years old, so if you just started out right now, then naturally your skills are going to be very different to my own skills right now. But at the same time, thanks to all of the awesome learning content available nowadays, you're probably already much better than me when I started. For example, I just recently launched my 9th Steam game, Dinky Guardians, which by the way, it is currently discounted as part of the Steam holiday sale. I made a video sharing the first month sales results, and I also made a video back when I announced the game sharing my goals with this project. One of the main ones was my goal for the amount of money that I'd like to make per month development in order to consider this a success. That amount was $2,000, which thankfully it looks like the game is on track to hit. Now, depending on where you live, that amount might be a ton or might not be really impressive at all. But for me personally, that more than covers my living expenses, so for me that is a very good amount. And back to the main purpose of this video, the most impressive part is simply the fact that that is actually objectively impressive compared to how much I was making back when I started making games in 2008. I made a really awesome video a few years ago showcasing my game dev journey, how in 2008, that is when I started making Flash games. Back then, I came across something called mochi ads, which basically allowed developers to put ads on their Flash games and make a little bit of money off of it. So with this tool, you could make some money, and of course, the more games you make, the more plays you get, the more money you make. So for me, back then, I was feeling pretty lost in life. I had just failed going through college and I had no idea what I was going to do in my life. So when I saw the possibility of making some money and potentially turning this into my job, I definitely jumped onto it right away. However, while it was possible to make money with Flash games, it was also extremely difficult. If you think Steam is difficult nowadays, and this was even more difficult, there were hundreds or thousands of games launched every single day. So pretty much like the mobile market nowadays, extremely over-competitive. So when I started making my Flash games, I remember that my first game, that one took about a week to make, and it only made something like $2 after launch. I remember doing the math back then and calculating that I was working and earning about 2 cents per hour. That sounds objectively terrible, but it was more than zero. Even more importantly, I vividly remember reading a really nice forum post at the main website for Flash games at the time, flashgamelicense.com. I really wish I could find that post again, but suddenly the website is no longer. And since the whole thing was behind the login, it's not saved over here on the Wayback Machine. But basically, there was a post where people were sharing and talking about their revenue numbers and how much money they were making with their games. I remember reading those posts and seeing some people talk about making $10 an hour, others were making $5 and so on. I vividly remember thinking, boy, I wish I could just make $1 an hour. If I could, that would make me so happy. However, I did not let that discourage me. I did not get depressed from seeing people make so much more money than I did. In fact, I actually got excited because what this said, this told me that it was actually possible. This could be a potential job. This had the potential for making a living, which was very important considering, again, I was pretty lost at that point in my life. I simply did the math, and after launching about 10 games, I did notice a nice uptrend. The first few games did make about 2 cents an hour, then maybe 5 cents, then 20 cents, 50 cents, and so on. So while these were still extremely tiny amounts, I definitely could not live on these amounts, even on a low cost of living country. Back then I was still living with my parents. But despite the amounts being so small, that uptrend did give me quite a lot of hope. If I could only improve my skills as a game dev, as a programmer, then one day I would hit my dream of making $1 an hour, and perhaps even go beyond that. That was really the motivation that I needed. I kept making more and more games, slowly inching up to that amount. After maybe 25 games, I finally did hit that amount, and then on something like the 30th game, I was up to like $2 to $3 an hour. And for my final Flash games, for my 40th games, on those I was making like $4 to $5 an hour. Again, depending on where you live, that might not sound impressive at all. But over here in Portugal, $4 an hour was the minimum wage at that point. So that means that technically I could make a living based on indie games. Then after making about 45 Flash games, that's when I decided to make the jump to PC games. That's when I researched a more proper game engine, and that's when I finally found Unity. Making my first Unity game was thankfully pretty successful. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think I made something like $12 an hour, which again to me was insane. Basically, the main point that I'm trying to say with this story is if you are a beginner, then don't compare yourself with someone who is at a completely different point in their learning journey. I'm mainly talking about money just because those are numbers, and numbers roughly equate to experience, but of course you can substitute money with really any game dev programming skills. If I had compared myself back in 2008 to someone with the skill set that I have nowadays in 23, then I would have been pretty crushed and felt pretty bad despite obviously not making any sense at all. the main comparison point that you should ever do is really just with yourself. Just ask yourself, are you better nowadays? Do you have more knowledge than what you did a few months ago? If so, then you're doing great. And if you do want to compare yourself to others, then fine, but at least normalize it for the same experience level. Meaning, if you're just getting started and you want to compare yourself to me, then compare myself when I was getting started, when I was 10 years old making IRC scripts. And if you compare yourself to that, you're definitely probably doing much better than I was. Or compare yourself to when I started making Flash games. You can still go play my Flash games on Congregate or on Newgrounds. You can go look at the games that I was making all the way back in 2008. You can look at those and see that chances are you're doing quite a lot better than I was. Also, what I'm talking about here is really applicable to literally anything, learning anything at all. For example, if you've just joined a gym, then don't get discouraged by comparing yourself to someone like Chris Bumstead. He's at the top of this field and you're just getting started, so obviously there's going to be a massive difference. But at the same time, he was also a beginner once. Or for some more objective numbers, don't compare your lift to someone like Larry Wheels. He can easily bench my max deadlift. So if I compare myself to him, I'm going to feel pretty bad. Or if you're an engine programmer, then don't compare yourself directly to John Carmack. Personally, I think that I'm a pretty competent programmer, but compared to John Carmack, I'm definitely nothing. So my advice is keep your comparisons in check. Focus just on yourself. Focus on being better than you were just a day ago. If you do that every single day for many days on end, if you do that and you don't get discouraged and you keep at it, then soon enough you will have the skill set you desire. Okay, so this was a very different video from the usual. I'm really not very good at making these sort of motivational style videos, but I hope you found it helpful and interesting to hear my story. It really genuinely breaks my heart when I read some of these comments of people who are pretty much being extremely harsh on themselves. They are ignoring the fact that it's perfectly normal to be a beginner. We were all beginners once. So if you're the kind of person who compares yourself to others and then makes you feel bad, if so, then hopefully this video helped you look at things from a different way in a much more positive light. And don't forget to pick up my game Dinky Guardians on Steam. I really hope you like it and please write a review. Alright, so thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.